Minjun thought about how excited he felt when absorbing demonic energy for the first time after such a long time. He believes that his powers had been charged to at least 5%. But as he continued to absorb the demonic energy, he thought about how a dark hound that was normally found in Isgard was doing in a place such as this. Minjun had previously considered that it would be possible for monsters on Earth to harbor demonic energy, but based on the instructor's reaction from before, there was also no mention of demonic energy or dark hounds during the monster education at the training center either, which makes the possibility of the dark hound managing dimensional travel on its own non-existent, as it can only be done by someone like Minjun who had reached the peak of dark magic powers, or by a saint who can utilize God's powers, an ability that cannot be used by anyone. Minjun soon finishes absorbing the demonic energy and wondered if he was overthinking something that was actually minor. He stands above the purple glowing stones, looking for the dark hound's corpse as he needed to make a report, and soon finds it below him. In the present, the instructor wakes up to the voices of the young recruits. He opens his eyes, hearing the panic in their voices. They stare at him, concerned about the instructor's well-being. The instructor immediately jumps up, causing the recruits to be scared. Both of the instructors soon woke up and asked them if they were all right and about what had happened. The recruit explained that Minjun delved deeper into the dungeon alone, shocking the instructors, and they soon told the whole story to the instructors. The instructors are furious and in disbelief at Minjun's actions. One of them grabs the recruit's shoulders and shakes him furiously. The instructor is in complete shock, unable to believe that Minjun would behave in such a way. He thinks Minjun should be immediately expelled from the academy. However, he acknowledges that he doesn't have the authority to make that decision at the moment, especially since he fainted instead of ensuring the recruit's safety. Just as the instructor contemplates going out to save Minjun, one of the recruits tells him to look to the other side of the cave. Minjun has returned, carrying the corpse of the monster he killed on his back. He also asked if everyone was alright. The instructors are shocked once again by the sight. They also noticed that it looked a bit different from the usual ones. Minjun tosses it in front of them and tells them to take a look at this son of a bitch. They examine the monster's body and realize it is the creature that caused them to faint. The recruits, too, are in disbelief and wonder how Minjun managed to defeat such a massive monster, noting that the ones they had defeated were light class while the one Minjun defeated was a heavy one. Minjun looks toward the cave's entrance and sees that the portal gate has opened. The instructor puts his hand on Minjun's shoulder and asks him if he truly defeated the hound on his own. Minjun nods, and the instructor acknowledges his achievement. The lead instructor orders the other instructor to lead the recruits out of the dungeon and that he will follow them shortly. Alone in front of the portal gate as the others left first, the instructor instructs Minjun to detail everything in a report once he got outside and to submit it to the lieutenant. He removes his hat, stating that he should not leave anything out, including the instructor's incompetence. Covering his face with his hand, he tells Minjun that they had fainted and left the recruits by themselves. The instructors had no excuse even if they were to be sent to military prison. Minjun agrees and promises to include every detail, not omitting anything. The instructor thanks Minjun for ensuring everyone's safety and expresses his appreciation. Minjun blushes, glad to be of help, but felt slightly embarrassed by the compliments. The instructor puts his hat back on, attempting to salvage his dignity, and mentions accepting his mistakes as a man. He says they should return as they leave the cave through the portal gate, which is emanating blue lights. The instructor wonders how to report the cause of his unconsciousness, meaning it would be hard for him to sleep tonight. Meanwhile, Minjun is ecstatic, having received compliments from his comrades and instructors. He feels it's a good day for him. As he is about to leave the dungeon through the portal gate, a notification window pops up, stating that the error has been fixed. Minjun is frustrated by the error, wondering what the error even was anyway, but dismisses it as something ridiculous and calls it a stupid system, similar to the one in the other world he came from. The window shows Minjun's stats, revealing the title of Luminuna is my favorite character cult founder. He has 60 points in strength, agility, and stamina, along with 10 points in demonic energy and an E-ranking possessed skill called corruption. However, something strange catches his attention. According to the window, he is the founder of a cult named Luminuna, which embarrasses him. He had created it in his previous world based on a character from Dungeon Power Fighter. When he had reached the peak of his dark powers, he created the cult in order to deter stalkers and annoyances, but only ended up with more stalkers and fanatics. He looks at the window stats and realizes that he had become significantly weaker, as his stats were much worse than he expected. He suspected that after his return, he noticed that all his demonic energy was gone, which was expected due to the dimensional travel penalty, but he was angry with the fact that from his endless list of skills, only one remained, and its rank was insanely low. He knew that the effect of corruption was probably a stomachache. Minjun compares his situation to a third-rate novel where the hero is sent back to level 1, which was absurd that he wanted to vomit. Minjun looks flustered as he couldn't reach any of his objectives at this rate. Despite this setback, his confidence remains unshaken, as he had still managed to reach the peak of his dark magic powers in Isgard, and since he did it once before, it wouldn't be impossible to do it again. A tall building is seen just as Minjun thought of his objective to recover his powers as soon as possible for the sake of the game company that has development delays due to monsters. Minjun states that it's doable, and heads to exit from the portal knowing that it was nothing compared to the times in Isgard when he couldn't do anything but endure. The scene switches to the chaotic training center, which was in utter chaos, due to the fact that a dungeon gate was closed while training was in session and that the lieutenant had not given clear orders, plus the fact that a mere recruit managed to defeat a new species of monster while the instructors were not able to do anything. Because of these events, the recruits were not able to get their private ranks or their freedom until dispatch. The recruits were now in their bunks and are confused about their status. The lack of clear instructions, the closed dungeon gate, and Minjun's solo adventure have caused disorder. The recruits are annoyed that they don't have the freedom to enjoy their time until they are dispatched. They discuss Minjun's achievement of capturing a huge hound on his own, pondering if he could achieve the rank of sergeant within 2 years. However, some doubt it, knowing the difficulty of the Hunter Corps exams. In the battalion commander's office, Minjun salutes and introduces himself to the commander. The commander salutes back and tells him to come in with a happy face, but Minjun sees the instructor on the ground. The commander then tells the instructor that he could leave now. The commander tells Minjun that an instructor who doesn't check dungeons should be punished, to which Minjun agrees with. The command then decides to cut the formalities and tells him that he called Minjun because he had something to tell him. As he sat in his chair, the commander tells him that he had a special proposal and wondered if Minjun would like to hear it. A crane and a flock of chickens, it is an idiom used to describe someone outstanding. The commander looks at Minjun thinking that he truly was no ordinary human and that he was lucky to have lived long enough to see such a sight. Who knew there would be a crane that makes even those above average seem like chickens? The commander continues to think that it would be a national loss if such a talent were to join the regular ranks, and that they are in need of additional personnel. The commander then goes on to tell Minjun that he knew about how he wanted to advance as soon as possible, but according to their rules, privates cannot take promotion exams for another year. But if granted an exception, it would be a different story. Hearing this made Minjun jolt up. The commander suggests Minjun join the Hunter Corps in Chorwon of Gangwon-do, while offering to use his authority to grant him an exception to take the promotion exams earlier. He slams his hands on the table, telling him if he went there, he wouldn't have to wait for another year. But there was an awkward silence between them. The commander nervously thinks that Chorwon might be too much of a stretch even if he's desperate to advance, and thinks that the promotion exception isn't enough for him. Minjun considers the proposal, understanding that the 104th Division, called the Invincible Hunter Squad, was a place his comrades had told him to avoid at all costs. The weather there would be freezing with snow constantly falling and piling up a lot, and that it would be boring as the dungeons and monsters appear there out of the blue as well, as it was considered to be the most extreme out of the front lines. But Minjun thought of it as being great. He thinks about how he could advance meant that it didn't matter where he deployed, and if granted a promotion exception, it would be amazing. On top of that, they had lots of dungeons which were the best conditions for him. In order for Minjun's plan to work, he needed to advance at all costs. The higher the rank, the greater his scope of activities, which meant obviously that there was no greater way to get a promotion than to accomplish stuff in dungeons. Minjun then tells the commander that he would go. The commander was stunned for a moment from hearing his reply, but Minjun shouts with conviction that he would go to Chorwon. Outside the Hunter Corps training center, Minjun bids farewell to his friend Roka, who is saddened by their separation. He tells him to contact him once he got to the base, but Minjun reminded him that he wouldn't do it. Roka then wipes the snot and tears off his face, asking Minjun why he wanted to go to the place where everyone wants to avoid. Minjun smiles at him and tells him that he had an insane goal in life. Roka wondered if it was to achieve max level 100 times, but Minjun brags that he had already reached his 13th and that 100 was no big deal. Roka calls him freaking crazy. Soon Roka left and Minjun waved him goodbye. Minjun then takes note that the loudest person on base had already left, and wondered why he was alone by himself. A military truck soon arrives in front of him. A voice calls out calling Minjun's name. Minjun is joined by Kim Minji, a muscular man who will accompany him to Chorwan, and asks if he waited long as they were late because of the snow. Minjun was confused by the snow and wonders what month it was to be snowing. Minji then turns around in a military fashion telling Minjun to get in the back so they could depart for the squad. Minjun sees him and thought of him as a show-off. As Minjun sat at the back of the truck, he thought about how he was actually going to start his life as a soldier when they got to base. But it didn't matter to him if the training was hard or if he had to battle monsters frequently. But there was one thing he was worried about: hazing. He thought about how he would end up in miserable situations like the ones that happen in various shows, and with a gloomy look he knew that he lacked the patience to put up with anything like that right now. But he closes his eyes knowing that he has to endure it for now. As the truck passes through a bridge, Minjun notes that if he hits a superior even once, he might be sent to the military prison as a regular soldier. They soon reach the entrance of the Invincible Hunter Corps. As they walk through the headquarters halls, Minjun is shoved into a room by Minji and is surrounded by other soldiers. Two of the soldiers exclaimed at the sight of Minjun, calling him a newbie, asking about his achievements and expressing admiration. They took his bag and threw it at another soldier, telling him to unpack it. Minjun realizes that these soldiers are the alphas of the squad and that they were looking at him like they discovered a new toy. They soon asked Minjun why he chose to come here. Minjun then tells them he came here as he heard that the front line was the best place to gain real experience and was the fastest way to advance. The two alphas were stunned to hear that, but soon laughed and called him crazy. Then they berate him with multiple questions about his personal life and asked to see his talent. Minjun then thinks about showing his talent so they could F off. He tells the alphas that he could show them one-finger push-ups. The red-hair alpha was mad at this and shouted what kind of talent that was, as they could do that shit all day, while the other alpha tells him not to get angry and to just let Minjun show them. Their faces soon turn to shock as they see something, a finger pressing on the ground. They see Minjun balancing himself with just one finger on the ground while standing upright. The alphas were shocked that Minjun could do a vertical one-finger push-up, and they argue amongst themselves about whether there was anyone else that could do the same thing. Another soldier appears, with his eyes glowing red. He tells Minjun to get lost. The two alphas called him no fun, while Minjun turns to see who it was. As he recognizes the voice, it was Sergeant Lee Sung-ho. Sergeant Sung-ho, Minjun's previous instructor, appears in the dormitory. The two alphas made fun of him because he had earned a vacation for tormenting kids and wondered how many days he got this time, but he shouts at them and told them he had gotten 4 days and to stop pestering him and leave him alone. The two alphas decided to leave while calling him a party pooper and pointed the middle at him. Seeing as they left, Sung-ho mentions that they were pissing him off and that he couldn't beat them up. While Minjun thought to himself that they finally left, Sung-ho then lays on the ground and takes out his handphone watching a video. The video was explaining that the volcanic dungeons have a naturally high temperature which causes damage. While the other soldiers sat upright, Minjun thought to himself that even in their tiny space, the difference in ranks was vast and it wasn't like they were in the 80s. Sung-ho then calls out to Dong-jin, who reports himself to Sung-ho. He then instructs Dong-jin that since Minjun was his direct junior he had to make sure to instruct him properly. Dong-jin then introduces himself to Minjun, who wondered if this guy was his senior. Dong-jin then whispers to Minjun if he wanted to talk over some food as he had gotten a special permit to visit the PX. The PX stands for Post Exchange, which was a type of retail store found in military installations. Minjun was shocked to hear that they couldn't go to a PX as they wanted. They soon arrive at the PX where Dong-jin tells him to pick out whatever he wanted to eat. Minjun then warns him that he eats a lot. Dong-jin smiles and assures Minjun that he was serious and wanted him to pick and eat as much as he likes. Minjun thinks of him as a nice guy. They soon brought over a basket filled with food where the cashier tells them it costs 300,000 won. Dongjin was shaking as he hands over his card, to which the cashier asks him if he was feeling cold as he was shaking so much. They soon sat down. And Minjun began to eat the food while asking Dongjin about why they couldn't use the PX on a regular basis, and about the special permit he mentioned earlier. Dongjin then explains to him that private first class and below could only go onto the PX on weekends, and that he needed to be a private first class or above to use gyms and at least a corporal to use PC rooms. Minjun was shocked to hear that only corporals and above could use PC rooms and thought of it as being insane. Dongjin continues to explain that it was unreasonable, but it was something that a private first class like him couldn't resolve and advises Minjun to just get used to it. Minjun then asks him if there was any way to change that rule. Dongjin tells him that he would need to advance at least to the rank of a corporal, but changes his mind and states that he needed the rank of sergeant to even attempt it, and that it won't be easy. Minjun was annoyed to hear that, as they knew that he couldn't flip shit here, and wondered if there was no other way to advance in ranks. Dongjin scratches his ear and tells Minjun that it was no easy task to become a sergeant in the Hunter Corps, and that he himself had failed the advancement exam many times and has been a private first class for 3 years old already. Pathetic, right? He asks Minjun, but Minjun tells him it wasn't and promised him that he will make sure that he advances next time, thinking that if he gets promoted quickly he could bring Dongjin with him. Dongjin smiles and thanks Minjun for the encouragement, when suddenly a young man appears behind Dongjin asking if Minjun was the new recruit. It was Corporal Guangshik. Dongjin then offers their meal to him nervously, which Guangshik didn't refuse. He then happily eats the snacks of Minjun and Dongjin. Minjun stares at him, thinking that he was a weirdo that appeared once Dongjin was done talking. With his mouth stuffed with food, Guangshik warns them that if they both suck at firearms training tomorrow, they were both dead, as he wouldn't let them go easily even if Minjun was new here. He then asks Minjun if he knew how to shoot. Dongjin cuts in and tells him that he was just about to explain the firearms training to him. Guangshik burps and scolds Dongjin for indicating that he was overstepping his boundaries again. Guangshik then went on to make fun of Dongjin for still being a private first class. Hearing him make fun of Dongjin caused Minjun to be angry, as he thinks of Guangshik as a bastard and a pain in the ass. He knew that he couldn't hold back any longer and started to cast his skill on him using his hand. Demonic energy soon crept towards Guangshik from underneath the table as Minjun wanted him to spit out what he just ate. A sudden painful feeling overcame Guangshik as he was talking. He immediately stood up from the table, causing Dongjin to ask what was wrong. While Minjun was smiling happily, Guangshik begins to look at all the food items he ate, making Minjun think that he was looking for the expiration dates. Guangshik then tells them it was nothing and that they should get back soon. Guangshik then leaves them behind, holding his stomach, wondering if the food had gone bad. Minjun smiles at him, leaving, thinking that even his E-rank corruption skill was useful at times. He then turns to Dongjin to ask about the firearms training he was talking about. Dongjin then asks him if he had fired a KX-2 with ICM bullets before, and tells him that the Hunter Corps uses bullets with even higher power than those. He explains that the ICM bullets used at the training center were equivalent to a pony, but the Hunter Corps version were like a wild stallion, as the recoil was completely different, as it sounds as if you're firing a cannon. Dongjin further explains that since monsters appear far more frequently here, the firepower is much more important, but assures Minjun that it might feel pretty awkward at the beginning, but he just needed to be ready to get scolded once and not worry about it. Minjun thinks about how the pony and wild stallion was a fitting comparison, but then he thought about how the long-range weapons in Isgard would be equivalent to an elephant, but Minjun was more than happy with just a wild stallion. Minjun smiles happily as he was looking forward to tomorrow. Soldiers are seen marching in the cold forest. Gunshots are heard at the firearms training facility. A soldier is seen firing at a target. The target was shown to be destroyed with its head gone. Minjun was feeling upset that he had missed one shot. Another soldier waves a red flag saying that shooting was complete and there were 19 direct hits with 1 miss. The 2 alphas and others were shocked to hear that. The other soldiers talked amongst themselves about how well Minjun shot and wondered if he was a shooting machine or just had dumb luck. The red-hair alpha tells the other one that his best score was 14, which was above average for the squad. 2 figures are seen in a watchtower. It was 2nd Lieutenant Kim Kielman and 1st Sergeant Hyo Tae-sik who commented on Minjun's incredible score and figured that the rumors were true. The 2 alphas asked Minjun how he shot like that, but he simply replies that he just did as he was told. Minji appears and tells Minjun he did well and that he wants him to continue showing them his best. He then informs Minjun about seeing him shoot at this afternoon's special firearms training, which causes Minjun to wonder about what special firearms training was. The two alphas were surprised to hear that Minjun was going to special firearms training. The other soldiers praised Minjun was his good shooting and Minjun thanks them. He then asks Dongjin what was so special about the special firearms training as he didn't hear much about it. Dongjin apologizes to Minjun as he didn't expect him to be such a good shooter. He explains that new recruits were normally exempt from special firearms training since they needed to take a while to get used to their ICM bullets. Dongjin then decides to give a short explanation. The special firearms training consists of two-person team entering the training facility and eliminating the monsters en route to the destination. Although the monsters weren't highly dangerous, they will have to deal with moving targets, and must be ready to counter their attacks. Another thing they need to watch out for was the civilian target plates that pop up every now and then, as hitting any one of them results in an automatic failure no matter how many monsters they defeat. Dongjin then assures him that there was no need to be scared when facing real monsters as the executives will be controlling the situation. Minjun's face was filled excitement at the thought of meeting live monsters during the shooting. Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.